What do you think of when you hear the word tradition? Do images of family traditions come to you first? Or maybe you thought of religious traditions, including the big T traditions and little t traditions we all know and love from religion class. But perhaps for you, tradition has a negative connotation. Are the traditions that come to your mind outdated, oppressive, or obsolete? To you, the very word may make you cringe. Now, what do all these rhetorical questions have to do about death, and specifically death culture in South Korea? Like people in this room, South Koreans view tradition in two different ways. Many see it as an integral and sacred part of family life, while others revile these old practices. In South Korea death culture, tradition equals Confucianism. And if you allow me to completely oversimplify what Confucianism is, Confucianism equals filial piety, and filial piety equals respect. A lot of math, I know. So here's the basic formula. What does this respect look like in Korean death rituals? Here are some examples. Carefully feeding and bathing the corpse, bowing deeply before the casket, scheduling the funeral at a specific interval after the death in order to symbolize the deceased's social status, placing a singular photo of the departed out at the funeral to remind guests of their persisting yet singular presence, wearing large brim hats outdoors to block the view of heaven, which serves as the equivalent of averting one's eyes to show deference. Having the oldest male mourner lay on an uncomfortable straw carpet throughout the mourning period, placing an emphasis on proper behavior at funerals during the mourning period, and to be careful to not allude to a parent or grandparent's future death while in their presence, crying the proper amount at funerals to indicate your level of faithfulness to the dead, and having family members or friends who were close to the deceased experiencing feelings of guilt for not having done more to make the deceased transition from life to death more comfortable. You may notice two themes that run through these rituals. The first is an emphasis on caring for the deceased person's physical body, and the second is the mourner's own self-deprecation in order to show respect to the person who has just died. These themes continue into modern Korean funeral rituals. However, you may be thinking that some of these traditions that I listed may seem outdated, antiquated, and you are not alone. In fact, the number of South Koreans who still practice all of the extensive Confucian rituals is quite small, and is becoming more popular for people to only pick a handful of these rituals or to shorten them. For example, traditionally there would be a 3-year mourning period, and now that is reduced to just a few days. The rise of Christianity in South Korea may account for the decline of Confucian funeral practices, as almost half of South Korea's religious population claims to be Christian, while only 2.8% recognize Confucianism as their official religion. Additionally, space for burial land has become scarce in South Korea, and the South Korean government has responded to this issue by passing a law that required those who buried someone in the year 2000 and beyond to remove that grave after 60 years. This push to conserve land has increased the popularity of cremation and a new preservation technique of death beads, which are small glass-like spheres made out of the deceased's cremated ashes. However, traditional Confucian rituals call for burials, so these shifts in both religion and policy seem to be moving South Korean death rituals away from Confucian tradition. Despite these changes, Confucianism still remains at the core of South Korean death rituals. Citizens, as well as famous South Korean figures, from politicians to professional soccer players, all participate in ancestor worship practices to honor the dead on national holidays, which coincide with the Confucian idea of filial piety. Additionally, non-Confucian death practices face opposition and still have a long way to go before they become the dominant culture. Despite advances made in language, science, and technology, people still do not fully understand death empirically or emotionally, and attempt to fill in these gaps of knowledge by performing rituals to cope with the reality of loss. While the political and economic landscape of countries such as South Korea may change, there is a constant need to find peace in death's wake. This consistency amidst change is reflected in human celebrations of death. They may vary slightly, but people continue to cling to their traditions. It is through these that they can preserve the memories of their friends and family who have died.